Selectwoman Gilman when she joins us. So I will call this meeting to order now. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening, members of the board, respective town staff, and attendees that are with us, as well as all of you watching from home. I hope everybody had a pleasant and safe Thanksgiving weekend and that everybody remains safe and well. As chair of the Exeter Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street on December 4th. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone, and we remind everybody that the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. All votes taken tonight will be done so via roll call vote. We'll start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When I introduce each member of the board, if you could state your presence and also whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. Good evening, Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Thank you.
I'm in my home alone in the room upstairs.
Okay. Selectman Brown, good evening.
Good evening. I am alone in the cave.
Okay. And our Vice Chair, Selectwoman Cowan.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here alone.
Okay. And I'm the Chair, Nico Papakostendis, and I too am here alone in the room. We have with us our town manager, Mr. Rustine. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay. And are you alone?
I am alone in the office, yes.
Great, thank you. And we also have our recording secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening, Joanna.
Hello. I am alone in the room, but my husband and daughter are downstairs. So
great. Good evening. Okay, we'll get started. The first order on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to make comment. We do ask, however, that if your comment is pertaining to anything on the agenda, you wait until we get to that agenda item. And I'll pause for a moment and see if any hands are raised from our attendees for public comment.
They look like they're all BRC members, along with one Andy Swanson.
Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. We do not have any proclamations or recognitions this evening, but I would like to thank a couple of people, particularly one of our attendees, Mr. Andy Swanson, who's our IT director. Andy worked tirelessly over the Thanksgiving weekend to get our server back up. And I also want to thank the town clerk's office and all of our citizens who came into the town clerk's office the first few days after the Thanksgiving weekend. We appreciate your patience while Andy worked on the server. So moving on, we will look to approve the select board minutes from our meeting on November 23rd, 2020. Are there any revisions or amendments to the minutes? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to accept the minutes of the Monday, November 23rd, 2020 as submitted.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Dean, in the absence of the clerk, who would take the roll call? Should I do
one of the other board members, Mr. Chairman, that doesn't have a assignment like that. So it could be the vice chair, it could be the other two members that are here. Your pick.
Anybody want it?
Anybody want to volunteer?
I can do it. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown. Did you say? Aye. Okay. I vote aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. We have two appointments this evening from two of our interviewees at our last meeting for the Conservation Commission. I would entertain a motion to appoint Connor Madison as an alternate member for a term to expire April 30th, 2022.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Vice Chair Cowan?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. And also,
Sorry to interrupt, but I think we have Mr. Mitchell on the line now.
terrific. Can you hear us, Walter?
Yes, hopefully the speaker will work.
We're gonna make one more appointment here, and then we'll be ready for your presentation.
Interrupt.
I would entertain a motion to appoint Adam Dunville to the Sustainability Advisory Committee for a term to expire April 30th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? None. Vice Chair?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
I vote aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. The motion passes 4-0. And Selectwoman Gilman has joined us.
Apologize for being late, Mr. Chair.
Oh, not a problem. Good evening. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay. And for the record, would you just state your presence and whether you're alone in the room?
Julie Gilman, I'm home alone.
Great. Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan handled the clerk's duties for the approval of the minutes and the appointments to the Conservation Commission and Sustainability Advisory Committee, respectively.
Thank you.
Congratulations both to Connor and Adam, and thank you for your service. We'll move right into our discussion action items. Though we only have three, all three discussion items are will probably give us a lot of thorough conversation, so we didn't want to overload the agenda too much. But first off, we have Town Council Attorney Walter Mitchell with us this evening. And if you recall at our last meeting, Mr. Dean gave an overview of HB 1129. Subsequent to that, Mr. Dean and I met via Zoom with Attorney Mitchell the day before Thanksgiving, and he gave such a good presentation that I thought it would be best that he come on and give the same presentation to not only the Select Board, but for our town residents. So, Attorney Mitchell, good evening.
Good evening. I'm glad we were able to sort out the audio problems.
We can see you and hear you well.
Okay.
So, Attorney Mitchell, we've had an opportunity to read the memo that you provided in our packet. And I thought perhaps if you could just kind of walk the board through as you walked Mr. Dean and I last week, that would be great.
Okay. Basically, what the legislature has provided is an option to the town. The town doesn't have to utilize this, but the only alternative to utilizing this option is the traditional SB2 process, which brings people together and exposes and risks exposure, COVID exposure, both in the deliberative session and at the time of voting. So this alternative is, first of all, at the option of the selectmen. The selectmen are the ones that decide whether or not to utilize this option. And it goes basically like this. There are two informational meetings conducted virtually by the selectmen. The first one, and there is no specific calendar dates by which this must be conducted, but I recommended to Russ that if the town decides to utilize this option, that it start around the date of your that would be you would have utilized for the deliberative session. So the first virtual information session is conducted by the selectmen. And they basically go through the articles on the warrant and explain what they are. People, members of the public can participate from the standpoint of watching and listening to what's going on. But unlike the deliberative session, there's not really an opportunity for the public to make their opinions known on the different articles. Then, after the close of the meeting, although I would recommend also before the close of the meeting, the selectmen should make known that there's an opportunity for the public to give input into the various articles electronically. And that's a 7-day period. And at the end of that 7-day period, the selectmen hold another informational meeting at which they discuss and debate among themselves the various input they have gotten on the articles, with the outcome the selectmen decide, and the selectmen alone decide, whether to amend any of the articles. There is not an opportunity in this alternative option, which is set up by the legislature, for the public to amend the articles at either of the informational sessions. So at this second session, as I said, perhaps the board will decide to amend the articles, and from that point on, it follows the normal next step for having the ballots be printed up. And then the third step here is voting. And again, the legislature didn't want people coming together to do that. So what this legislation provides for is a drive-through voting process, where basically you drive over to a certain spot, a parking lot, or Nico, I think in our conversation last week, you suggested an area where the farmers market is held. But whatever area is best suited for this use, and you staying in your car and bringing your warrant with you, you check in with the supervisors of the checklist. You are handed a ballot. You fill out that ballot in the car, and then you drive further on and hand your ballot in, just as if you were going through the voting machine at the normal voting place. And that's pretty much what the legislature has laid out. The one, I can't say it's the only little twist here, but what it also says is that the very first article, there are two ballots. One they call the initial ballot, and the second one the alternative ballot. The initial ballot has those items on it that are required to be on the official ballot. The election of officers, and the other main thing is the voting on zoning articles. And then there is the alternative ballot, which has everything else on it. Plus, as a very first article, it asks the voters, each voter, do you approve the use of these procedures? If the voters end up approving the use of these procedures, then obviously the votes follow how the totals come out. However, if the voters in that first article on the so-called alternative ballot do not approve the use of the procedures, then basically all those other articles get tossed out. And the only alternative that the selectmen have at that point is solely with respect to the operating budget. And the choice that the selectmen have with respect to the operating budget is either to hold another meeting sometime before September 1st, but that would be solely on the operating budget, not on the other articles, because they have in effect been defeated. Or the selectmen can decide to accept last year's budget as the budget that's going to be used for this year. And this is slightly different. When I say last year's budget, please don't be fooled into thinking that this somehow incorporates the default budget process that you're used to. It does not. It does not take last year's budget and add or subtract from it items that are not going to be incurred again. It just takes last year's budget, and you run with that as an operating budget. And that's pretty much it.
So when you, couple questions, Attorney Mitchell, and then I'm sure the rest of the board probably has a lot of questions as well. When you described the scenario of the drive-through, what came to mind was where the select board had temporarily placed the farmers market earlier this year, which is at the Tuck Center, which is actually where we go to vote under normal circumstances. And I was thinking that's one area where there's the flow of traffic would be conducive to this. But when you speak electronically after the first live virtual meeting and information session, the public has 7 days to electronically submit suggestions, questions, etc. Can you define electronically, or what encompasses that? Is that like email, phone calls? I mean, what?
Let me go back to the statute itself.
Okay.
If you would permit me, there's one other piece here that I forgot to mention. Let me mention it now, and I'll come back to your question, Nico. And that is, the statute requires that notice of these the use of these alternative procedures be mailed to each voter in town before this all begins. So there's a written explanation to them. And that's required to go out 7 days, at least 7 days prior to the informational session. The first one.
And then back to, excuse me, the definition of electronically. Does the statute spell that out?
Okay, at the end of the first section here, it says after the live virtual meeting is adjourned. That's the first one. Questions and comments from the public shall be solicited and received via electronic mail, and you're correct, it does go on, other alternatives, voicemail, text message, or by other electronic means.
And then for the public that hasn't seen the memo, the next sentence says there is no guidance for how to do this or keep track of the comments.
That's right.
Okay.
There's a lot that's not said in this statute, and we just have to use good common sense.
So if the board were to debate whether to even consider this, and then upon doing so, you said it would be the first Saturday in February, which is when we typically have our deliberative session. The board should really start discussing this sooner than later, correct?
As far as the timing, yes. I didn't mean to suggest it had to be a Saturday, because Russ was considering, I know, whether the board might want to do this on a Saturday or on a weekday evening. But that's up to the board. It's just, I think it'd be best to do it around the normal time used traditionally, usually for the deliberative session, which this year would have been the period for, I think, starting Saturday, January 30th through the next Saturday.
Are there any questions for Attorney Mitchell from the board?
About the physical mailing of notices, is there anything stipulated about, so there's a physical mailer, are we bound? Our obligation is just to mail, not to ensure that it actually,
Correct.
That's it. Yeah. All right. And physical mail is the stipulation.
Physical mail, yes. Now, my picture has gone dark. Is the audio still working?
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
I wonder what did that.
Any other questions for Attorney Mitchell? Mr. Dean, if we were to go forward with our normal deliberative session, have we even investigated whether SAU 16 would approve the use of the typical venue, or would we have to look elsewhere?
Well, our relationship with the SAU is basically that we have that facility reserved for our deliberative session typically, and we do that very early on. So we have not gone back to them. I do know that Superintendent Ryan and I actually spoke just today about this whole issue of the process. Mm-hmm. And so he's actually very curious to see what the board is doing coming out of this, because obviously we all share the voting area, and we have different ballots, but they're voted on at the same time. So I think our interaction with the school on this is likely to continue through the process.
Okay, because I think that's a specific question worth asking. I mean, I understand our relationship, but the SAU at the end of the day may not want 200 people coming into the auditorium in February.
Something we need to follow up on for sure. Yeah, and we'll do that this week once I kind of hear tonight where the board may be leaning, and we can have that conversation.
Any other questions for Attorney Mitchell?
I had one, Mr. Chairman, if I could. I just wanted, Walter, could you confirm for me in terms of the budget, because you said that you had mentioned that if the optional procedures fail and we end up going back to the prior year's budget, that there are no adjustments to it at all in terms of the default budget. So I just want to be clear on that with the board, because we do have a debt service payment that's due on the library in 2021. That was not part of the 2020 budget. And can you confirm in the budget in order to pay that obligation?
You would have to. All it says is elect. The second option is the Board of Selectmen can elect to deem that the meeting has adopted the previous year's operating budget article, not including separate warrant articles.
Okay. Because that essentially is, I know the board knows this from the Budget Recommendations Committee process, the delta in the 2021 budget as compared to the 2020 budget is essentially the library debt service payment, about $360,000 some odd dollars. So that is the delta. Thank you, Walter.
So Attorney Mitchell, I'm envisioning, again, just using the Tuck location for the sake of conversation, based on what you described, I'm envisioning a cold day in March. It may or may not be snowing, and the way you've described it is the supervisor of the checklist will have to be the first point of entry. And then once registered voter status is confirmed, then they're to drive around, drive through, as you described it, to actually vote.
Right.
All of the poll workers, volunteers, select board members, town staff, et cetera, will basically have to be outside all day, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Dean, that might also be something to talk with Jennifer, Perry, and Jay Perkins as to what the DPW can do to build for tents or anything of that nature.
Like portable heaters and things like that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yeah, sorry, my cat was doing a drive-by there just to show you. Along with this discussion about where the event may occur, are we already saying we're going to do the deliberative session virtually, which is what I would like to do?
I think that's what we need to discuss as a board.
Yeah. Okay. I just wasn't clear because I thought that would be the first part of the conversation and then how to do it would be the other part. But yeah, I would recommend talking to the school some more, given we're going to be, for the most part, outside. If maybe the high school is a better place because of the logistics of how to drive around the school and stop and fill out your ballot, et cetera.
Yeah, that would be another good site. No, I mean, these are obviously, we're not, talking about the minute details, but I mean, for me anyway, before I can decide, how I would vote, I mean, these are some logistics we need to work out.
And the impact.
Mr. Chairman, can I get some clarification from Attorney Mitchell on the deliberative session piece? Walter, if the town holds a deliberative session, can they do it via Zoom, or do they have to do it in person at the high school like we normally do?
I think once the legislature put this in place, this is the option. I mean, there was a process put together a year ago under the governor's emergency order, but I wouldn't think that process was still in effect anymore now that the legislature has spoken to it.
So just to clarify, so I'm clear, if the town does a deliberative session like we normally do, we would have to do it in person?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I hear anything more on that subject, because we're talking about this every day with other attorneys, I'll get right back to you. But
okay. And obviously for the board's thought process, if we hold a traditional deliberative session, you obviously understand the in-person implications of that.
I mean, you can have the Zoom for informational purposes, but you're not, obviously nobody on Zoom is going to be able to, there's no real process for registering voters or putting them through the voting process with the supervisors on Zoom.
That's a good point. Selectwoman Cowan?
I mean, I am interested in not having an in-person event. I think that would be a mistake for a whole host of reasons, and I'm happy to, sort of look through what other towns are doing. I know that Hopkinton has had to have drive-through votes a couple of times when they tried to pass their school budget, and I think we should maybe extend an invitation to one of their select board members to come on and talk about how their process went. Now, I don't think that they have, or their town moderator, somebody to talk through how the process went for them. I don't know how to address the amendments that typically get made to to warrant articles. I don't know if there is anything in place either from the legislature or in any sort of governing provision, or if we could, I can't imagine the way to facilitate something like that maybe a moderated chat function on a Zoom call might be one way to do it, unless we just want to get rid of it. But that does not seem terribly democratic to me. So I'd be interested in coming up with other ways to address that. But I think if it's the will of the board, I'd be happy to do some outreach to some towns to see how they're managing their town meetings.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I? If what the speaker was just referring to is under this optional legislation, there is no provision for anybody other than the selectmen making decisions on the amendment of articles.
Okay.
Walter, that's a provision from the legislature or from the governor's orders, or do we have authority to do whatever we want based on what usually happens in our, like, does this, I don't quite understand how that's possible.
This is from the legislature.
That's part of HB 1129.
This is the option that they have created for this year only for to address this COVID situation.
So then are you saying, are you saying that if we did something that is outside of the realm of this legislation, like if we had a yes and situation where we figured out a way to, make amendments in the chat or something, that would be going against the legislature? Oh, you did. Nope, you muted yourself.
I think you have to hit *6 on the phone, Walter, and you should be able to unmute yourself there.
Is that?
There you go, I think.
There we go. Yep.
It's strange because I thought I was still on the phone, but in any case, at certain parts of this legislation, where it, for instance, where it says drive-through voting, but doesn't give, it gives some standards, but doesn't give any detail, that there's the flexibility to do what fits the town best. But as to the amendment of articles, the legislature has said if you use this optional process, then it's the selectmen who make the decisions on the amendments of the articles for this year.
Presumably based on the input received electronically between the first meeting and the second meeting, correct?
Yes.
So it was a legislature, Mr. Chairman, it was the legislature, obviously, that introduced SB2 to us originally, right, in the process to adopt that. So they've simply created emergency legislation in the face of COVID-19 to delegate these amendments for this year only coming up to the board.
Right.
Okay. Before we discuss any other, yes, Selectwoman Gilman?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with the process that occurred at the State House that this came out of. Originally, the bill originally just dealt with public meeting notices in a paper of general circulation, because newspapers have stopped running in some smaller towns, that they don't have a newspaper that gives the 14-day notice or whatever it is you need for a public hearing. This alternative, if you read the whole RSA, it begins that we're required to post it on our website in a prominent place. But then further, once it went to the Senate, that's where it got amended to add in all of this about the optional or the special meetings and the town meeting. And because the State House was shut down, there was very little public comment, and I don't believe I got any notice of it, quite frankly. So it passed through the Senate and was concurred by the House, but I think it was concurred electronically.
Okay.
So I can't answer your questions about what the legislature meant because it's not in the Senate.
No, and it's certainly not ideal, but you've got a choice between risking infection or this and
or an imperfect process.
Right. Couple questions for the board. Do we want to, obviously we need to discuss this further, but we need to make decisions sooner than later so that we can start to prepare. Would the board wish to continue discussing this tonight or put it back on the agenda for us to discuss on the 21st after we can allow Mr. Dean, number one, to get some questions answered from SAU and also the DPW, and Selectwoman Cowan, at the very least, if you're willing to do some research with some of your resources in other towns, I think that would be valuable information as well. Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf?
I think option 2, waiting to get a little more feedback on other options before we go ahead and proceed.
Agreed. Is that the wish of the board? Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question of Attorney Mitchell while we have him? Mm-hmm. Walter, is there a requirement for the board to hold the traditional budget public hearing like they normally would in a normal year?
Not addressed in this statute, but I would say yes, definitely.
Okay. So the second Tuesday or the third Tuesday in January, whatever that Tuesday is, that they should hold that like they normally would?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Selectwoman Gilman.
The other thing we need to think about is the school ballots and and they have a separate deliberative session, so we have to consider if that's still going to be maintained separately or not, because I think, or this is a question to ask, do they both have the alternative ballot?
That's another good question.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Dean, if you would work on that, and then Selectwoman Cowan, if you want to reach out to some of your contacts, that'd be great. Any other questions for Attorney Mitchell? No? Okay. Walter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Thanks, Bob, for helping me work through those problems.
No problem.
Thanks, Walter.
Good night.
Thank you, Walter.
Okay, so Mr. Dean, we'll put that on the agenda for the 21st.
Yes, and I'll check on the facility, Mr. Chairman, as you asked, and I'll see what I can find out from the schools as far as whether they are contemplating a deliberative session or they're leaning toward this virtual meeting option.
Okay, and then also, I think it was Selectwoman Gilman that mentioned the high school. I mean, that's another opportune place. So if we could find out from the school whether they'd permit that.
Yes.
Great. Okay, segueing to speaking of the Budget Recommendations Committee began their work in late July, early August, and then September spent many hours meeting with department heads and staff, going through almost every line of the budget, carefully vetting it, with the exception of one meeting where we had a conflict. I was able to attend all the meetings, and the BRC put a lot of time and effort into the budget this year, and it wasn't an easy budget. With us this evening, I noticed in the attendees we have several members of the committee, but as a panelist here to present their recommendations, the highlights, and the challenges is Chairman Bob Kelly. Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, Nico. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Since I didn't introduce myself in the beginning, I'll do that and do all the COVID protocols.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Kelly, the chair of the Budget Recommendations Committee, and I am alone in the room. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to be official here.
No, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I appreciate you having me on. I'll try to make this brief. Unfortunately, the budget was not brief, but we'll see if we can get through it. As Nico mentioned, we began meeting in August. We met 8 times. Meeting with all, and that is just the overall committee. The subcommittees met, by my count, over 25 times, the various subcommittees with the folks from the departments, trying to vet through the budget, and more importantly, the CIP, which was pretty staggering both last year and this year. You see our report that we put together. We did have a number of challenges. The budget actually was the easy part of the challenge. Russ and in the direction of the board, I think, did a fantastic job of really just pre-discussing with the departments about various COVID impacts with some uncertainty of tax revenues later in the year, dial back on some of the expenses this year, in addition to requests for next year, which made the review of certainly the general budget a lot easier. We put a number of the, in fact, almost all of the vehicle replacements on hold, as Russ is going to do a system-wide audit next year of our, let's say, vehicle purchasing protocols. It's been a number of years since we reviewed that, and I think it's a high time that it's come, and the committee fully supported Russ in that effort. But there were a number of specialty projects, especially in public works, that we had to deal with. As many of you know, our infrastructure, although we have been keeping up with it, by my count, I'm on the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee as well. And at least in my tenure over the last 25 or 30 years, we've spent over $100 million on our infrastructure. And we're still behind, unfortunately. There's new regulations that are coming by almost every year that we're dealing with, both with stormwater, water, and sewer. And we, as a small town with either 3,500 ratepayers or 6,600 taxpayers, are shouldering that burden without a lot of commercial and industrial impacts on that. So it's a tough process that we all go through every year, trying to manage our needs and wants. And as you can see from the list, none of the items that we have on there are, sort of pie in the sky. Most of them are directed by either New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services or the US EPA, giving us ultimatums and very strict timelines on having to proceed with some of these projects. Many of the projects, like dredging our CSO pond, equalization pond out behind the mill, haven't been done, effectively ever. EPA has given us a lot of slack because of, we did spend $50 million on a wastewater plant. We spent $6 million on a groundwater treatment plant. We spent millions of dollars upgrading the surface water plant, but there are a lot of things that the state and the feds have requested of us over and above the things that maybe we as a community would want to do. So having said that, the CIP items we tried to narrow down to really critical projects. The Salem Street area has been waiting for a number of years to get their water and sewer and stormwater upgraded. By my, looking back in my files, I think we started talking about it in 2012. Many of the pipes there are circa 1950. Luckily, that area is up on high ground, so they haven't had as many problems as some other areas in town, but it's sort of high time. That's an expensive project, over $5.5 million for all 3 components. But again, the folks there have been very patient, and it's time to bring that utility, that section of town, up to the 21st century with their utilities. There have also been some discussions you've seen in the CIP. The Public Works Garage was requested a couple of years ago, to put in a new garage. And then just this year, there have been discussions about a new safety complex, which was not in the CIP. So we allocated some money to take a look at that. We're going to have an interactive approach, dialing in members of the select board, the facilities committee, and the budget committee to really try to drill down and come up with, let's say, plans for those two facilities that would meet not only the needs of the community, but also the cost criteria that we may have to live under, given these other projects. So I'm here to answer any questions on the specific numbers. Again, we tried to balance needs and wants and keep the tax and the water and sewer rates reasonable. I'm not sure we did that. I'm not sure we did an adequate job of that. But again, a lot of these projects have been sort of forced on us by changes of environmental regulations. Not that that's a bad thing, but again, for a relatively small town, it gets to be very, very expensive. And that's sort of the climate that we're living under right now. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me a few minutes. The board, I gave you the whole list of the board because everybody really, really worked hard this year. Came to every meeting with the Zoom format. It made it somewhat easier for people to make at least portions of the meeting, and that worked out great. Had a lot of new committee members, and they were very vocal on various aspects. So it was a good process, and we will continue to support the select board in their decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree. It was very, very interactive, and all of the members really participated, which was refreshing to see. Mr. Dean, you have your hand up, but first I'd like to ask members of the board if they have any questions or comments for Chair Kelly.
That's a good sign.
Okay. Mr. Dean.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I actually just wanted to thank the members of the committee and Mr. Kelly for chairing the process this year. I know it was unique being on Zoom and working our way through the process. And I felt like the subcommittees really worked very hard at reviewing the budget and offering their input to us. And it was just really great. I thought it was a great process. So thank you, Bob, and to the committee members that are in the bullpen tonight. The other thing I wanted to mention too, just as an aside, is that as we know, our tax bills just went out, and the new tax rate is $24.49. That's up from $23.27 last year. And I just wanted to make the point, because people do come to our office and they ask that the town share of the rate is actually up 20 cents. So that's $60 for a $300,000 home, about $5 a month. So our share of the budget, or the tax levy, actually represents about 24.2% of the total. So I just wanted people to know that, because in 2010, we were actually at 30.6%. And over the last decade, that percentage, or our share of the pie, has actually dropped all the way down to 24.2%. So I think that that's important for people to know when they come in. And actually, it's always a good conversation, actually, when we have it with the public, because it gives us the chance to sort of educate them about just exactly what our share of the pie is and what the services are that we provide for that amount of money. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody so they were aware of that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Kelly? So Bob, if you'll indulge me, I agree. I would like to just recognize quickly your committee this year: Nancy Belanger, Kaylee Bryden, Liz Canada, Don Clement, Kathy Corson, Amy Farnham, Anna Grazier, Dr. Judy Rowan, the Vice Chair, Chris Suter, Corey Stevens, Chris Siegmont, and Dr. Anthony Swan. Thank you, everybody. And also thank you to the department heads and Mr. Dean, who I know put in a lot of time to work with you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, feel free as you schedule a public hearing in January. I'm more than happy to join that as well and answer any maybe resident questions about specific line items.
Great, thank you very much. So I would ask the board, we have Chair Kelly's memo, and we also have the updated complete budget. I know we had an opportunity to kind of look at it over the weekend, but if we could take the next week or two and sort of go through the budget and revisit it amongst the board on our meeting the 21st, if there's anything anybody has any questions on, if people want to make any amendments or changes, increases, decreases, we could take some time to do that. And then obviously in January, we'll have our full budget hearing, but I'd like the board to be able to weigh in on the budget. And Mr. Kelly, you're invited to come back the 21st too, if you don't have anything to do that evening.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to our typical COVID-19 update. Chief Wilkin, you're usually the first in my view, but I don't see you. There you are.
I purposely slayed off screen, but you caught me anyway. Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, where to start? I think I forwarded a copy of the report. I know Russ had it on Friday, and I looked at the packet. So it just covers lots going on. You, as we do, pay attention to the news. You see what's going on. There are no secrets statewide. We're doing slightly better than the national averages in New Hampshire. That's something to be proud of, but we're still seeing a positivity rate well in excess of 5%. Those are numbers we never saw in the spring. 7,000 plus residents in the last 2 weeks of the state have tested positive. On the positive side, not to be coy, 1880 in Rock County, and even better numbers, 58 in the town of Exeter. And in March, I would have felt those were dismal numbers, but comparing Exeter to our neighbors, 58 in 2 weeks is a very respectable number. And as of yesterday, we had 197 of our residents test positive, so we're monitoring 31 daily right now. A number of those have been identified in our nursing homes throughout the county. As you know, Exeter has several, and we're aware of a few cases with both staff and residents and all, but nothing has been identified as an outbreak. That's all good news. Our nursing home staffs are doing an outstanding job monitoring the health of their employees and protecting the health of the residents, and my hat's off to them. I try to remain positive in this whenever we can. From a fire department standpoint, just going to throw it out. We did have a call on Thanksgiving Eve that totally destroyed a home. We relied on heavily mutual aid of our neighbors to not only fight the fire, but that was in the non-hydrant district. So we had 6 neighboring tankers show up to shuttle water from the closest fire hydrant at Brentwood and Crestwood Drive. And we were able to bring the fire under control in 2 hours, but not before it destroyed the vast majority of the homes. Very sad day for Thanksgiving for all of us fighting the fire, but more importantly, the family and their impact on Thanksgiving Day. We stayed busy all week. Again, we had another fire reported on Front Street. Thankfully, it was a very small fire in a basement and was brought under control quickly. The report goes on to speak about our neighbors. So I won't call out the neighboring communities around us that have had outbreaks, but it's in your report, only to say that Exeter's doing remarkably well there. I see James has popped on. I'll let him do his own report, but I know we have had a few complaints called into the firehouse by residents, again, still with, discussing the mask ordinance and how we're enforcing it, and people that perhaps are not paying attention. And the AG's office has been communicating with James about locations in Exeter that need further investigation or prompting to, let's just say, do the right thing or maintain the right vigilance. Moving on to some of the better news, we've all heard that the vaccine is on the horizon. As I stated in my op-ed, it can't come soon enough for not only healthcare workers and frontline responders, but certainly for the folks in the long-term care facilities and our residents. It looks like, if the news can be trusted, this week the vote will be taken and perhaps that vaccine could be rolled out. We've been in contact with the governor's office and DHHS. Slightly conflicting numbers on how many vaccines may be available to the state of New Hampshire, but it will be a significant number. But that number is going to affect who is in line first. The governor's office has been clear that healthcare workers, those in the long-term care facilities most vulnerable, are over 65 and older, and then first responders will likely be in line first. I was brought up to speed on a meeting regionally. Some chatter came up from the SAU, and I thank both Rich Kane and Dr. Ryan for kind of keeping us in the loop. Question came up of using the SST, the logic there, as the SST is still going to school. The children are still several days a week in that facility, so parking is an issue as the traffic flows. So they offer the high school as an option due to their remote learning, and the campus at this time will be virtually clear through January 15. So it made sense to kind of discuss that, and that discussion kind of grew legs today. Further discussion of using the sophomore parking lot as a tented area. One thing I just want to make clear to the public is at this time, the vaccine is going to be given, will be distributed on a, how do I put this? I guess you'll be invited to get the vaccine. You'll be notified if there is vaccine for the certain group. So what we don't want is a run on the high school by a number of people requesting the vaccine, because unfortunately you're likely just going to get turned away by a check-in or a law enforcement presence. So, and again, it's not to be mean. It's just the vaccines will be limited in their ability and how many that they can actually vaccinate in any given period of time. So it sounds like, and thank you to the schools, the SAU, for helping us with this, that the high school might be a great option for that. And again, we lean heavily on them. That's a great facility, and just the traffic flow and our ability to maintain security and check in there is just so easy compared to some other locations. That works out well. Yeah, I go on to talk about.
I'm in the meeting.
Okay, sorry. The CDC chatted a little bit. Again, what the governor reiterated here is that at this time he's still considering first responders in the mix, even though the CDC kind of pulled them out. We at the Firehouse, we discussed on the 23rd with you the value of the rapid antigen test. And a question popped up earlier. We didn't start until this week. We received our test kits on December 2nd. I think it was like Wednesday, Thursday last week. So this week we have begun testing all of our employees with that rapid 15-minute test. And I'm very happy to tell you right now, the first test, including mine, everybody has come back negative to date. We'll be chunking through all of our shifts as they come back to work. And we hope certainly that we do not have any asymptomatic positives. But to date, very good news, we are all negative to date. And we hope to continue that trend. The last thing on my report was just another little highlight. For those of you that have been downtown, the light should be on. I know sometimes with the darkness of the day, that some lights that are on photo cells might pop on earlier than others. It's not because they're off or broken. It's just the timer. They're not on electronic timers, they're actually on photo eyes. And my hat's off to Beth DePel and Dave Black and the great band of volunteers that pulled together that I kind of coined it the reverse parade, but I guess it can be just a parade in general. Unbelievably well attended on a really, really hard to travel, dismal night. And the volunteers take heart the fact that all the efforts were watched by thousands of people. As I think we said, the traffic was nonstop from 5 o'clock to 6:30, bumper to bumper. And then from 6:30 till 8, there was never a time we didn't have vehicles out there, and everybody seemed to have fun despite the terrible weather. But the setup from 8 o'clock in the morning on, in the rain and the snow and the wind, was just something that no one that spent the day out there will ever remember that. So we'll ever forget that. It'll be remembered forever. And But my hat's off. Thank you, Exeter, for all that attended. And I know Bob's probably listening off in the wings. We hope that a video of that for those that couldn't attend will be posted on EXTV, so you can see all the displays and all the hard work that went into putting that on. So I think Exeter deserves a little bright light here, and that certainly did some of it.
Agreed.
That's my report for the night, Mr. Chair.
Well, Selectwoman Gilman has her hand up, but I don't know if it was she or her cat, because I saw your cat come into the...
It was me. Chief, I know this is all fluid as far as who's getting the vaccine when, and we don't even know when we're going to get the vaccine distributed. But I was wondering during the conversations, if any conversation has happened about teachers and what order of priority they're going to come in.
They have, in the two conversations I've had in the last 6 to 8 days, 7 days, teachers have been in the mix, but they have not been identified as the early recipients. And I'll make sure that James can add to that, as he is aware of some. And again, I can't emphasize enough. It's all going to come down to how many doses of the vaccine that Exeter region of the state receives. If we're on the low end, if the state receives 10 or 12,000 doses based on population from Pfizer, and we have to wait until the Moderna study comes through, they're going to have to really limit them to healthcare and those most vulnerable in a long-term care. If the numbers creep up towards 20, 25,000, obviously more groups can be added. And if that number is even nicer, some of the national models that I chatted with my state counterparts out of New England, regionally, some numbers have been floating around that doses would be distributed at around 25,000 per million population. So if you know, New Hampshire arguably is 1.3, 1.4, we should be receiving more than 25,000, but it could be metered. It could be through December into January. And that's, I believe, what's going to limit the initial groups. I know teachers are in the early mix. I just don't think they're going to be in the mix that might be vaccinated in late or mid-December. I know, James, I'll quiet down and let you jump in if you've heard anything different.
Sure. I heard, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but it was going to be rolled out into 4 or 5 phases. And I think teachers are in phase 2. So I know, like the chief said, phase 1 is going to be first responders and healthcare workers. I think phase 2 includes teachers and a lot of other groups as well.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman, did you have another question? Or is...
Yes. In the discussion about the long-term care facilities and their employees, has there been any talk about the dietary staff being included in that? Because that came up in this initial round of the extra $300 per diem for the week, and that the dietary staff weren't included at first and then were joined in later. So I wondered if that part of the discussion could happen earlier rather than as an afterthought as it did previously.
No, sure. I think that makes perfect sense, and I'm taking notes right now to ask. The specific people at the facilities have not been identified, and I'll throw us in the same mix. Should an administrative chief officer like myself be vaccinated, or just the frontline workers, my EMTs and firefighters? And I put the folks doing the repairs and taking the trash out and creating the meals in that same group. I know the facilities have been identified and healthcare workers, and then put that in quotes. But I personally, like you, don't see any reason why we would miss a handful of folks that are just as important to the operation. But those specific folks have not been identified as being in line first, or missed or skipped until phase 2 or 3. So I can find out more and see where they're at with that.
Great. Any other questions for Chief Wilkin? Chief, before you go, thank you very much for the op-ed piece that you wrote several weeks ago, which I think was just carrying on from our discussion last week. I thought it was a nice message, and thank you for writing that.
Well, thank you so much. It was so kind of you. It's funny, your prompt along made it easy to kind of just drop pen down, but throwing something together in an hour, I'm glad it at least covered the material. And we did receive a lot of positive feedback. And it was kind of pushed along in a lot of social media. So, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for your prompt. So,
James, did you have anything to add?
Yes, just to continue on our conversation from the last board meeting. I know we discussed updating our town ordinance with the new state ordinances coming up. So I did send a copy of the last draft to the board members and to Mr. Dean. I hope to include the updated changes in the next packet. I didn't get it into this one in time, but just to go over the changes that I did make. Select Board has been separated into 2 words throughout the document. We removed the whereas. Every other New England state, with the exception of New Hampshire, has adopted and implemented a comprehensive mask order due to the fact that now this statement is untrue. We revised number 11 to read as a face covering is not required for any person who is hearing impaired or any person while communicating with an individual who is hearing impaired or who has a disability, medical condition, or mental health condition that makes communication with that individual while wearing a mask or face covering difficult. So this is language kind of borrowed from the state's document. It's more inclusive and I felt it was more appropriate. So those are the changes that we made. I also recommend that we change the effective date to coincide with the state's mandate. So it would be executed on January 15th. We could reinstate it from there if the governor doesn't, but it would give us an opportunity to change that language back to whereas the state of New Hampshire does not have a mask mandate. Okay. So those are my recommendations, and I can include the full ordinance for the next packet if you'd like.
Please. Any questions or comments with respect to the mandate from the board? Okay, James, thank you. And if you include that for the next packet, that would be great. Chief Wilkin, one last question for you. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. How are we doing with respect to PPE?
Doing well. Chief Pizon has been able to keep up. We've assigned our EMS officer the duty to take, it turns out right now to be daily, but in the summer lull, it was weekly inventories to identify our burn rate, or in other words, how much we use on a given period. And we just received 595 masks shortly after your last meeting. It was before Thanksgiving, so it would have been 24, 25 November. And we have gowns as well. To date, lately, the state's distribution of PPE has been stellar. Every time we place an order, they've come through with no shortages. So keep your fingers crossed. That if we can weather this peak and then come down the other side after the holidays, that we have PPE and it's strong still. So, and Lord knows we're using it every day. We're seeing more than 2 to 3 ambulance calls a day that are COVID related. So when you dress out both attendants and if there's additional crews necessary, we're burning through 4, 5, 6 sets of PPE per patient visit. So we're chunking through it, but it's holding strong. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Okay. Greg and Melissa, do you have any COVID-19 updates from the Parks and Rec?
We are, thank you, Mr. Chair. We are open for right now for anything, but our registration software is down. So, but we are here mostly to discuss the skating rink. I know Lovey was interested in the skating rink. Ironically, we've actually started this discussion a couple of years ago, Mr. Chair. Skating rinks are difficult. One of the things that both Melissa and I talked is to do it right, we gotta get the correct system. One of the things that is out there is called a nice rink. You may have seen them in backyards. They come with a liner and boards and everything. In the past, when we used to hold a ice rink on Park Street Common, we just put boards up and we flooded the ground until it froze. So that's a lot of water that really would just go right into the ground until eventually we had a hard freeze. So that being said, the nice rink is the way to go, but they do not come cheap. And just to give you a comparison, a official size ice rink is 82 by 200. A largest nice rink you can get is 50 feet by 80 for $7,000. So right there, that's quite a bit of money that right now the Parks and Rec does not have. But there's other factors that go into it, and I'll throw it to Melissa. Melissa worked in a previous community that had 3 of these rinks, and logistics of organizing all these, and I will let Melissa take over from there.
Sorry for yelling at my children earlier. Excuse me about that. I thought I was on mute. So I used to work in a community. We got one, and people were disappointed because of how small it was. So we got 2 more. There's a lot of maintenance involved. Without it being in a fenced-in area, we found a lot of vandalism. So people would throw wrappers, would throw beer cans, and as soon as it would melt a little bit, because there's no refrigeration system, it would actually get frozen into the ice, and it made it really difficult. Any storm that happened, any icing, frost, whatever is happening for the weather, it has to be groomed. And it makes it very difficult. So when we had talked, Greg and I and David had talked about doing this, we talked about doing it in the tennis courts or the basketball courts, which would be fenced in and would allow for us to stop people from coming in when it was soft and able to be ruined. So it is a lot of work. And again, because of the sizing of them, either you have to usually have multiple, or you kind of make it a tot skating because it's very little. So it isn't that it can't be done. It also is a lot of work and a lot of setup, which I don't know that we would be able to turn around in the next few weeks, which we would have to do. You have to have, I think it's 5 days of freezing weather to get the ice to set. So we were always waiting to have that happen before we could even get it going. So if it's something that we want to look at down the road, I think we can do that. It just would be really, really hard to pull together for this year. I know in Portsmouth, they have a refrigeration system under theirs. Is that right, Greg, at Strawberry Bank? Yep. So you see people that do it with their own backyards, and it's awesome, and it's so much fun, and it's wonderful. But they can tell people when to get on them and when not to get on them. Once you put them on public property, if it's not fenced in, it's very difficult to manage.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I had a general, is the fake, like is there plastic or some kind of plasticky surface that you can skate on? Is that an option at all?
Daryl, actually, I did look into that as well because I somehow ended up on their mailing list from past conferences. It is ultra expensive. The $7,000 would be a drop in the bucket to have the synthetic, and it's usually a management company that would come and actually set it up. And so you have to have a management agreement because it's only there for a short period of time. You're not purchasing it because it's about $50,000 to $60,000 to purchase it, and then where do you store it after that point? It is like Legos almost, where they are all interlocked together, and it's a plastic surface that is skatable. Not many in New England do it. I have asked a few that have done it. The one thing that I would recommend is if we wanted to do this, something similar, if anyone's familiar with skating rinks like Jackson Landing or Guilford, New Hampshire, they both have an ice rink that is cement floor that can be used year round for rollerblading, and it also has a roof over it. So the maintenance issues of snow removal are minimal because now you're preventing that inclement weather to get on it, and all you have to do is resurface it. But there's a lot to it, and how Melissa mentioned there's 20 miles of PEX tubing underneath the Labrie skating rink, and they have a management company that runs that too. So it's not all cut and dry, and having talked to someone over there today, their numbers are way down. Not a lot of people are coming out skating yet, but it is the beginning. And I do love it, Lovey. Don't get me wrong. We both think it's a great idea. It's how we get there and spend wisely is what we're trying to do.
Any other questions or comments for Greg or Melissa? Okay, Greg, back to you. You made a mention that your system is down at the rec center.
Correct. The same server issue that you had mentioned. Our web server did not survive that crash. We are actually working with our software company to rebuild it. It will be rebuilt hopefully tomorrow. That is a 5-hour process. So fingers crossed, there's no snafus. But also, which is totally unrelated, is we are in a building from the 1840s, and we had rodents move in and decide to chew on our fiber. So they ate up our fiber. We thought we had found it. We started it back up, but then it shut itself back off. So hopefully tomorrow those parts come in, we patch it, and everything's hunky-dory, and we get our phones back and we get our internet back. But until we get the parts in, we're really hoping that these are the parts and it's not a further thing. Our fiber line, Mr. Chair, was actually installed in 2001. Andy Swanson told us. So we were one of the first fiber lines from the public safety building, because everything flows in the public safety building. The same with the town office. So we're the two oldest fiber lines. That ours, unfortunately, was a snack to some rodent.
And how can the public get a hold of you in the meantime?
They can still call our number. Our office manager is being diligent. Leave a voicemail message. We will call you back immediately. It will be an unknown number, of course, because we are using personal phones to return their phone calls. But we want to get a hold of you, or email us. All our emails, we still have access to all our emails, and we've been quite busy that way. David has been busy because our ski program prices go up tomorrow per gun stock. So that's been a really big program so far. A lot of families signing up for it, and it's a great opportunity for those that want to save a lot of money. A couple $100 on a family ski pass to go up to Gunstock.
Okay. Mr. Dean, for the sake of sanitation, if we haven't already, are we looking into removing the unwelcome guests?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. As soon as possible.
Please. Okay. Any other questions for Greg and Melissa, or comments?
Hey, Greg, is there a cutoff for the gun stock for people?
Nope, Daryl. It's just a price difference. So we just have to get them the final numbers, and that doesn't start until late January. So we have plenty of time. So, but register soon. It's going to be a busy gun stock season, and to rest assured, they have a lot of COVID-19 protocols. For instance, the lodge is not open to people. You got to come up dressed to go skiing. Your car is your locker room. We won't be doing transportation as we did last year, of course. The only time you can go in the lodge if you have rentals, and you need to pick up your rentals, and if you want to purchase food. But you don't eat the food inside. You need to take it back out to your car or some of the heated patios that they have. So they're trying to keep it very minimal. They're consistently wiping down the lifts as well. It's going to be some cold sanitizer on that, but they're trying to keep it as much as possible. Masks are required, which a lot of them people wear masks skiing, so that helps. And we have plenty of room, so please sign up for those of the public.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dean, your COVID-19 update.
Sure. So my updates are, Mr. Chairman, you had asked last week about revenues that we've received from the federal government with respect to COVID-19. So I just wanted to count those for the board. We have received $362,525 from the Gopher. That's our allotment from earlier this year. We also received a first responder grant, if you recall, back in the summertime for $126,471. FEMA reimbursements of $16,505. Elections reimbursements so far of $5,647, and then a DC 20 CARES grant for $18,176. So the total there is $529,324 of general revenues. EMS fund has received a stimulus grant in the amount of $25,623. So that's to offset costs for runs that are devoted to COVID-19, of which the chief was alluding to earlier. And then the rec revolving fund revenues of $19,000. As you recall, we had a child care program set up in Parks and Rec earlier this year that was $19,000. So altogether for all funds so far year to date, we've received $573,947 in revenues.
You just repeat that number one more time, please.
$573,947 in revenues.
Okay, thank you.
And that's to date, and we expect to get more back when our elections reimbursements are approved. We have about $30,000 outstanding right now to the state from the federal elections, so we expect to get those revenues in as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
And the only other COVID-19 updates I had were just to report back to the board again that our town clerk's office is fortunately up and running again. And, our thoughts are still with our employee who experienced a bout with COVID-19. It was quite serious. She has recovered or is in the process of recovering. It hit her pretty hard. And our thoughts are really with her. And I just also wanted to acknowledge and thank the public because they've been extremely patient with that office being short-staffed, which is something that we really needed, and they've been responsive to that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I was actually contacted yesterday, which is Sunday, by the town of Sandown, and they went through a similar experience with their town clerk's office. So they read about our experience, and the administrator there has reached out to me. They are wrestling with what to do with a positive COVID case in their town clerk's office. So I have offered them Mr. Murray to give them assistance, and anything that we can do to help them make their situation better, we definitely will. So we know we're all in it together, and that's how we're approaching it. The last thing on my list is just more of stating the obvious, which is, the state had over 1,000 positive cases last Thursday. We know we're in a peak situation with this. When you read the press releases, it's very daunting. You go through it and you see the deaths, and it's scary, and it's understandable that people are shaken by it because there's a lot there's a lot to it. So we just want to continue to reinforce the things that we have been reinforcing, which is please wear your mask at all times. When you come into the town office, sanitized often, and practice social distancing. I mean, those are the three cornerstones. We all know that. So we hope that people will do that. It's a little dismaying to see the hits, the positive cases. You see Rockingham County carrying the lion's share of those cases as of late, and that's a little bit of a change. It used to be that Manchester and Hillsborough were more of the bulk of the positive cases, but it's actually shifted over to Rockingham right now. So people really need to be extra vigilant about that. And I'll just stop there unless the board has any questions for me.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Dean? Okay, great. Thank you. Moving into regular business, we have one request for an interest waiver. And Mr. Dean, I went through the paperwork. It seems like there's a little bit of a story here. Can you give us a summary?
Yeah, this was a property owner that called us and basically said that she did not receive her bill in the mail, the first half tax bill. So interest accrued on her account. And so she's asking for the interest to be waived from the first half of the bill, and that's $144.96. And I say plus or minus because interest actually accrues on a daily basis. So it would be the amount of that plus or minus whatever was added in the last couple of days.
Okay, and has the bill been paid yet?
My understanding is I believe she has said that she has no problem paying the bill, but I can't verify that it's actually been paid. I would have to check with our deputy tax collector on that.
So if we receive our tax bills regular mail, if a bill is not paid, is the property owner then contacted via mail with a late notice or notice that there hasn't been any payment, or how does that work?
So what happens is whomever is the owner of record when the bill is generated originally, So in this case, you have a first half bill that was mailed out in May, and we mailed it to the owner of record, right? And we did not get any return envelope saying no known address, not deliverable, that sort of thing. So the town makes an assumption that the bill is delivered. And then the account is just managed as any account would. If it goes delinquent, we apply interest to the account, and we do not proactively reach out to property owners. The law is that the owner is responsible for the bill. We don't go chase tax money down. And so that is how it works. And sometimes owners come back to us later on and they say, oh, I didn't get the bill, or it didn't get to me, lost in the mail. Sometimes it's a change in ownership that happens. There's a lot of dynamics that go on with real estate transactions. And actually the second request you have tonight, because there are two of them, is slightly different than this one, but the same concept, where there was actually a closing on real estate. It was a cash transaction, and the buyer thought it was the taxes were rolled into the purchase price of the property, but it actually wasn't. So therefore, there was interest that accrued on the account. So it's a variety of things, but we always follow the main message, which is the bill is due, and it's up to the owner to pay it. And we really don't have the resources to sort of track every account and who's changing ownership and what's going on behind the scenes. So in this case, the owner is telling us she never received the bill to begin with, that it was a post office problem. We don't have anything returned to us, so we really can't verify that, but it's not a large interest amount, and this doesn't occur frequently. So that's the other thing I would say. It's not like we're inundated with these requests. So I think it's just up to the board to make a judgment call as to how you feel about it.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
A question that's tangentially related to this, and Nico, you can let me know if I should ask it another time, but in discussions about communications and what we can do better at communicating, do we post anywhere that the annual taxes have been sent out? Are there notices on our Exeter Gov page that state, quarterly this has been sent, or you should have received this in the mail, or is that stuff pretty transparent when people come to town hall? Just curious if we're doing our part to make sure that everyone is able to.
Right, sure. We have a tremendous amount of activity this time of year around tax bills. So we put it on the website. We let people know that it's been mailed out. We have a banner that tells them how they can pay their bill online. We actually have a lot of people preempt our mailing of the bills by calling us and asking us, are they out yet? Are they out yet? They want to pay them. I think some of the more nuanced ones are, like you see, this one is addressed to Haverhill, Mass. It's an LLC. So it's not, your average owner per se, a residential property owner in the town. This is a company, an LLC that was formed down in Massachusetts. So those are people, entities that may not necessarily interface with the town regularly. They're more of sort of maybe it's an investment company or somebody like that. And we're not, the personal contact's going to be up to them to actually.
So we do post on different.
We do.
Websites and, okay.
We absolutely do that. Yes.
No, that was a good question. Thank you. Mr. Dean, I see your point, but I also, to what you just said, the tax bills go out the same time every year. So I know, if you're going to get it, you don't get it. Maybe, picking up the phone, but in this case, it's not, as you said, somebody that's living in town that's actually would look on the website. Any other comments from the board? Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, is that a new question or? Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Selectwoman Gilman?
So given that the tax bill has gone out and Mr. Dean is represented that perhaps the person has already paid, if we go ahead and do, I guess my question is, should we go ahead and do this just as that separate amount, so when the bill is paid, it includes the whole thing? If I were that person, I would wait until I got this approval before I wrote the check, just to have one check. So.
Right.
I mean, I think they should have paid it and then waited to see what the outcome was, but that's my personal opinion. The interest keeps adding up. You're making an assumption that we're going to approve it.
And if the direction from the board in the future is you want these bills paid before I bring you interest waiver requests, we can certainly make that message known to the taxpayers, if that's your desire.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I think it shows good faith.
So noted.
If there are no questions or comments, members of anybody on the board wish to make a motion?
Motion to approve or deny?
My motion is to deny the request for the
An interest waiver.
for an interest waiver.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Is it on the whole thing? Sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just started talking. Is it on the, are you moving to deny the interest on the whole, on the whole bill?
What was the date that you were contacted, Mr. Dean?
It's on the email, so it's Wednesday, November 25th originally. That was the office contact. So that's 12 days ago.
What's the daily rate again?
I believe it's 12%, but that's an APR rate, so it's probably going to be $1 a day, roughly, give or take.
Then I would say, as of the 25th, when they reached out to your office.
Can I also make a recommendation that we include the address that we're waiving?
So Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, the motion, if you wish to amend it, could include the address as well as the date of November 25th?
Yes. So motion to deny the request for excluding the interest rate, the tax interest rate up until November 25th, and also including the address, the Exeter address that's in question.
Which is 155 Front Street. And Selectman Brown, do you still second that motion?
I do.
Any other discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Cowan?
No.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf?
Aye.
Selectman Brown? Sorry, say that again. The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, and then Mr. Dean, the next one we're looking at is
this is
mentioned on Water Street.
Yeah, 163 Water Street, Unit C2, and the story is in the middle of the email there. Mm-hmm. It talks about the owner and the property purchase, that there was no bill received for it, thought it was rolled into the purchase price of the property, doesn't have a problem paying the tax, but is requesting the interest of $137.75 from the first half of the year be waived.
All right, and this is another one where the tax hasn't been paid by anybody to date.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
And again, I think just to highlight again what happens in these transactions sometimes is that further down in the email, you can see that the first half bill did go to the prior owner as the bills were mailed on May 21st, 2020. So again, this is sort of what happens when you have a cash transaction and you don't necessarily have closing agents involved. I don't know exactly who was or who wasn't involved in this, but typically that would be picked up on at a property closing. And it looks like for whatever reason it wasn't in this particular instance. And therefore, the bill got paid, it looks like, but the interest accrued. Or I'm sorry, the bill was not paid and the interest accrued. And so therefore it's hanging out there.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Some questions for Mr. Dean? Then I would entertain a motion.
Motion to deny.
Second.
So to be specific, it would be the motion to deny the.
Go ahead, Chairman.
So the motion would be to deny the interest accrued on the tax bill for 163 Water Street, Unit C2.
Yes, in the amount of $137.75.
Okay. Mr. Dean, just to be clear, is this still accruing, much like the other one?
Yes.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, would it be your intention to do the same thing and cut it off effective December 1st?
Based on the date being, the bill date was November 16th, and they reached out to you December 1st. So I would say as of December 1st.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to deny the request to waive the interest accrued for the tax bill of 163 Water Street, Unit C2, up to the date of December 1st, 2020?
Yeah.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Selectwoman Roundtree, Selectwoman Cowan.
I'm going to vote against this one as well. I think that we should be a little bit more lenient in our policy. We base our budgetary decisions based on taxes that we estimate getting, and I don't know that I'm not of the mind that it makes sense to penalize people for what I see are pretty small errors and and something that is easily missed. So I'm going to vote no against this motion as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Cowan?
No.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf?
Aye.
Selectman Brown? The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
The chair votes no on this one. The motion passes 3-2. Okay. Next up, we have, I think, Mr. Bison's back to talk about the change order in police detail. Mr. Bison?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The Gale Park was completed just in time for Veterans Day. I had told you when previously came to you that I'd had to come for police detail because of the high traffic area and trucks coming and going during the renovation of the park. We needed a police detail there, so that total came up to $4,728.75. The duration of the construction lasted about 12 days. We had some weather issues that delayed it. And then one last thing is, originally the project was spec'd with a metal border helping secure the cobblestones. After the installation, it just did not look correct or formal. So I made the judgment of having them remove it and re-loam the area, which ended up cleaning it up quite a bit. And it looks very good. And hopefully in May, this board will be marching there during our annual Memorial Day parade. And anyone that wants to see the demo, please go onto our Facebook page. Exeter TV has it as well. Morningstar Ariel did a great free video for us, so I want to give them kudos. And the walkway came out tremendous and better than I had anticipated.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bisson? Okay, seeing none, we have two motions on the table. I'd entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $875 for edging removal from the Parks Improvement Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown. Clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes. And I'd also entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $4,728.75 for the police detail from the Parks Improvement Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown. Clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bisson.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dean, Town Manager's report, please.
Okay, a few things to go over tonight. First, I'd like to just start off with, it's been alluded to a couple of times that we really had some challenges in the past week with our server situation here at the town offices and around in various town buildings. And we actually do have a consultant who we were queuing up to do a cybersecurity type audit anyway on our IT situation. So we're actually going to bring in that company and that individual to do a documentation of the incident. So we'll be back to the board with that. Andy's been great in working overtime and really working thoroughly with John Diaz, who's our works with us, our contract worker from JDSCC. It's a full-blown event, and I really want to make sure that the board has a comprehensive understanding of just exactly what happened with that, so we can look at redundancies in our IT and hopefully not have something like that happen again. But just appreciate everybody's patience, and definitely was a challenge for us to work through it. And as Greg alluded to earlier, we're still working on it day to day right now, just trying to get everything sort of back up and running the way we want it to run. So that's that. Something for the board to consider annually. You typically consider, if people are willing to take vacation leave, that we can close the town offices and the finance office and Parks and Rec for Christmas Eve. This year, that's on the 24th. We've done an informal poll of employees, and they have already all volunteered to give that leave up. So what we'd like to do is be able to close the building on the 24th if that's amenable to the board. So you can think about that as we kind of wind through my report. I wanted to also thank the Holiday Decorating Committee, who did such a great job setting up the downtown. We got a lot of feedback last week from residents who were very much very thankful, very grateful that the town, even in the COVID-19 environment, had a group of volunteers that went out and decorated our downtown and set it up to be lit up. And I know Chief Wilking and Beth Dupel and others were really instrumental in making that happen. So I wanted to make sure that we really gave them a lot of thanks for that, because this is the kind of year where they really went above and beyond the call of duty on that. And I did have a chance to get out to the high school Saturday and look at what the volunteers had done. And I was sad that Beth was so wet, because she was out there for probably the better part of 2 hours. And Chief Wilking looked dry and Beth looked very wet. So Beth, you got to take a break and go into shelter when you can. But they just did a great job putting all the decorations out for people to get at least a sense of the holidays this year, which was good. I also wanted to point out that in lieu of we typically this year have a town hall drop-in event where we have our boards, committees, and commissions volunteers come to the event with food. And what we thought we'd do this year, instead of doing that, obviously with COVID, it makes it difficult to have in-person gatherings. But we wanted to send out some small gift cards out to our boards, committees, and commissions from the local Chamber of Commerce, just a nominal amount, just to recognize them for all their efforts this year. So with the board's support, we would graciously ask, your support to be able to do that this year. So that is that. On project updates, I just wanted to mention quickly that we are collecting tax bills. We know that right now. So we are deep into collections. People can pay their tax bills online. We do have it advertised on the website, like I was mentioning earlier. So if people want to take advantage of that, they certainly can. There is a fee to do that, to pay your tax bill online, but that fee goes to our third-party vendor to be able to facilitate the payment. So the town does not collect any of that. I talked about coordinating with the superintendent on deliberative session a little earlier, so I won't hit on that again. I did want to mention a couple of project updates from Public Works. West Side Drive, field work has been completed on that, and that includes soil borings, sewer service inspections, and survey. And the consultants are using that information to prepare several conceptual design alternatives. And they're expected to be ready for DPW review in early January. So that's coming. The West Side Drive project is evolving. Second public meeting is scheduled to be held in February and March to solicit feedback from the neighborhood on the alternatives. We talked about Salem Street a little earlier tonight. The consultant is preparing 90% design documents for review in December. Second public meeting on that project is going to be held in January or February. And then plans and specifications will be finalized for bidding after that meeting. And obviously, Salem Street's one of the big CIP items that the board is considering for the warrant this year. And then the final project update is some good news. Kingston Road. Jay Perkins, our highway superintendent, has made quite a bit of progress with easement acquisition in the last couple of months. And so DOT does think the project can fit into their 2021 construction season based on changes to TAP projects in other communities. So we got some really good news on that. I know when the board got the last update on that project back in mid-October, there was some question as to when we would get on the DOT list. But since then, we've made quite a bit of progress. So I'm happy to report that it looks like, at least at this point, that we'll be on the list in 2021 for construction. And hopefully that will come through. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Before we address those two, the office closing and the gift cards, I'd also like to thank your executive assistant, Pam McElroy, who came in over Thanksgiving weekend on her own time and decorated the town office to try to bring some normalcy for the employees that are working in the town office, and she did a really great job. So I just wanted to recognize that. The office does look as festive as it can look during COVID.
As I tell her all the time, she's an all-star. We're lucky to have her.
Indeed. So with the office closing, the finance department, Parks and Rec, and employees are going to use their vacation time?
Yes, they would.
Okay. And the gift cards that you mentioned, would that be in lieu of the funds that are usually spent for the food and whatnot?
Yes, correct.
So it's in the budget.
Correct. Yes, $10 a gift card and about $1,300 overall expense we anticipate.
Okay. Any comments from the board?
And that would go back into local businesses. Again, that's just to be clear about the gift card itself. It's a Chamber of Commerce card that is usable downtown at local businesses. So the money would go right back into local businesses downtown and around town.
Do you need motions on both, or just a consensus of the board?
I think just a consensus, unless there was any kind of opposition to it or concern. I think we would move it ahead.
Any objections on either matter?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dean, thank you. Okay, Select Board Committee reports. Selectman Brown?
Communications Committee, the survey has been out, and they have asked me to promote it at this meeting. So if anyone and everyone would like to go to the town website, right on latest news, there's a tab for the survey. It's anonymous, or if you choose to leave your information, but definitely fill that out. And that is all I have.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
No updates this week. We're meeting on Friday with the Housing Committee.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
Let's see. Tomorrow is a Conservation Commission meeting. Some things that are, one thing that's going to be very interesting, I think, for people is our Energy Committee next Wednesday, the 16th. We're going to have a presentation from Community Power, which is the group that is kind of leading the way towards the electrical aggregation of communities. So we should, in the end of it, have a lower electrical rate on your bill. And then Tuesday of that week is the Heritage Commission, and Thursday that week is the HDC. And I think you've all seen what happened on Orientation Day in the State House. I was out national news like. I did not attend. I was sworn in remotely.
Okay, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Yeah, we had the Rec Advisory Committee where we talked about the basketball league, the potential of still trying to have it. No decision has been made by that committee or by Parks and Rec. And then it is summer camp planning season again. So we're waiting on, a lot of logistics from the state, whether or not to base our recommendations and the structure of the camp on the recommendations from this past year, or, waiting to see what is happening with the vaccine. So there's a lot of prep work going into a lot of these decisions, and then none of the decisions are being made quite yet because we don't have all of the information. Planning board this past Thursday we approved changes to the downtown People's United Bank, as well as a number of other small projects that are not going to substantially change the landscape of anybody's public space.
Great. Thank you. And I had a sustainability committee meeting last Tuesday, which was very brief. Dave Sharples gave an update on where we stand with our grants and initiatives, and just kind of looking forward towards 2021, how the committee can continue to promote sustainability throughout the pandemic. So we'll be meeting again in January. So with that, we'll go through correspondence. The first piece was Mr. Bisson already addressed the hockey rinks. We received an email from the state talking about the drought improvement and the cautiously positive outlook. But I think, Mr. Dean, Director Perry indicated that she saw this going at least into the early parts of 2021, correct?
She did. I think it's worth probably bringing her back at some point in the not too distant future, just based upon, obviously we're getting a lot of rain as of late. We know that, and snowpack came in. So it would be good to hear from Jennifer. I think her most up-to-date thoughts on the drought condition. I don't think we need to worry about people watering their lawns right now, but it would be good just to get a sense at whether it's late December, early January, just to kind of reconnect on that issue.
Fair enough. And then, Mr. Dean, could you speak to the correspondence regarding the estimated water rate increase?
Sure. So Pennachuck actually owns a community water system in the town. It's out in the Forest Ridge area. And when they set their rates, they have to actually notify the town. So we don't have control over their rates. What happens is they go to the PUC in order to have those rates approved. But I always find it very interesting because you can look on page 2 of the correspondence and see what their average monthly residential bill is. And right now it's $69.52. And under the new rate that they're proposing, it would be $85.40 a month for just water. Now, when you compare that to the town's rates and what our average water bill is, it's quite a bit higher than our average bill. So I think that's always an interesting comparison to make. It's a small system, but out in the north part of town, they don't have access to public water. So this is what they have.
Thank you.
So that is what that is. That's a disclosure to the town that they are going to the PUC to increase their rates.
Okay. We had a letter from the American Independence Museum looking for support for their annual fund campaign. Mr. Dean, refresh my memory. Is that something the town usually contributes to?
We're a member. We're an organization member. So I believe we pay $250 a year to the AIM to be that level of membership.
Okay.
So we'll just make sure we keep that up to date if that's okay with the board.
And also the Society of St. Vincent de Paul with their annual holiday appeal for donations. And if the public is interested, it's in the packet, and it describes ways in which people can donate to the society. We had a letter from Family Promise acknowledging and thanking us for our donation of $750 that the town made on November 16th. And we received notice from the City of Rochester, New Hampshire Zoning Board of Adjustment. We received this being 20 miles within a proposed communication facility. Mr. Dean, is this something that town staff would participate in or go to, or you?
Not normally, just because even though it's within 20 miles, we probably can't see it or really have an interest in it. On occasion, we'll get these, and if they're in a neighboring town or they're sort of basically abutting the town, and we think there may be an issue with it, we will have our planner participate in these meetings, but typically we don't. It just depends on what the location is. This is up in Rochester, so I can't see where we would have a real active interest in this at this point.
And last, we've got the 2021 Select Board meeting dates. And when I was going through this, Mr. Dean, I thought, particularly after what Attorney Mitchell said, I think a lot of this is fluid right now. We do confirm that we need to have our budget hearing on January 25th. That would be the third Tuesday. But then everything after that, will come, I think, after the board deliberates on what type of town meeting we're going to have. Mm-hmm. So my question is, we're not doing this, flows into review board calendar. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 21st. And I think that's our last full meeting for 2020. Is January 11th too far ahead? I mean, would be 3 weeks.
Right. So when we looked at the calendar, New Year's Day is the 1st, and then you have, which is a Friday, and then you have the 2nd and 3rd, and then you have the 4th, which is Monday. So, it's really up to the discretion of the board, how you want to handle that. We did plug in the 11th. We certainly could do a meeting on the 4th, if that is your preference. So, we don't particularly have one way or the other, just kind of looking at the holiday calendar and trying to make adjustments on the fly a little bit.
Well, obviously, I'd like to get a consensus from the board. I think my preference would be to meet the 4th and the 11th, given the fact that it would be 3 weeks from the 21st. But I would throw that out to the board and see what the wishes are.
I could see either one.
Yeah.
I'm happy with.
Okay.
I don't have any travel on my schedule, so either one is fine.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, are you recommending the 4th and 11th and another meeting in January, or that depends on when we're putting in the town meeting?
Well, I'm suggesting the 4th and the 11th, as well as the 25th, which would be the bond and budget hearing.
Okay, just wanted to be clear. Thank you. And I'm fine with it.
Okay. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, is that acceptable? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, we'll reconfirm, just so you know, we'll reconfirm the date of the budget hearing because it is on a Tuesday, not a Monday. Mm-hmm. So I need to go back and check which day is Civil Rights Day in January. It's typically the Tuesday after that. The calendar is a little quirky, but I'll get back to the board on that. Just so you know, it's a Tuesday, and that Tuesday is set by law. So right. That's a unique day that we have the budget and bond hearing on.
So let's, Mr. Dean, let's pencil in the 4th and 11th, and then on the 21st, you can confirm that third Tuesday date. And if we have to make adjustments, we will.
Okay.
Okay. The last item on the agenda, I would be willing to entertain a motion to enter non-public session. The motion will have to quote the RSA, which is, anyone wants to write it down, is RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, parentheses A, parentheses C.
Can you say that again?
Yes, RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, parentheses A, the letter A, and then parentheses C, the letter C.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that we go into non-public session 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, parens A, parens C.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, first, we need to know what that RSA refers to as a general subject matter.
Yes, this is with respect to paren A, personnel matter, paren C, reputation matter.
Okay, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Mr. Dean, do you remember how you got us to that other room the last time?
Yeah, I think so. What you need to do is leave this meeting, and then I will send out a separate Zoom invite to the board members, and hopefully all will go well, and you can join me in the other Zoom room.
Okay.
And just a question, we haven't done this in a bit. Will you come back to this meeting as well to close out the public portion of the meeting?
Yes.
We have to, yes.
Okay, so we'll leave it up for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we all back? Madam Clerk, refresh my memory, we need to, or we could entertain a motion to seal the minutes.
Yes, we can do that right now, and we can give an end date or to just permanently seal them.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will move to seal the minutes for a period of I don't know. I'll make a motion. I move to seal the minutes until Mr. Dean is no longer in our employment. That sound adequate? I don't know. Just seal the meetings forever.
Second.
Are you seconding my seal the minutes forever?
You could seal until unsealed. I mean, you can make a motion that way if you're more comfortable doing it that way.
Okay, then I'll withdraw my first motion and move to seal until we unseal them.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown. The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. And the motion passes. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to make the next motion.
I was just going to ask for it.
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion to second. Discussion. Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good
Stay
night.
well.
Thank you.